I was exhausted, struggling to sit up and pull the blanket over my legs despite the cracking pain in my lower back. I loved winter even though it tortured my body and soul. In New York, it was so hard to have a real winter. All week I had been buried in my bed, letting the world collapse around me, ignoring my mother's yelling and even the pitiful meows of the cat begging for affection. You texted asking what I thought about those things, but I just looked at the messages and continued my journey of burrowing into sleep, knowing I had nothing more to say when my mind was empty, truly empty. Sometimes I wanted to become a vegetable, just lying there breathing in the little air left in our dilapidated, wretched house we called home. I was sick of wiping up each raindrop that crept in through the leaky roof, sick of the flooded scene with water rushing into the house, sitting scrunched up like frogs on a lotus leaf waiting for a peaceful sleep. I struggled, not knowing how to tear apart this current life and move on to something new and better. I tried my best to earn money from jobs I didn't enjoy much. No work meant starvation, but throwing myself into it. Would life really get any better? I was powerless and useless. I just wanted to lie there, digesting and eroding myself until I took my last breath. The text message chime went off, and once again, he pulled me out of the murky, dense emotions engulfing me. If I didn't look at my phone, I wouldn't even know if the sun was up yet, because my room was enclosed by moldy, stained walls on all sides. The recent flood had caused chunks of lime to fall off the walls as white as eggshells, leaving behind the smell of mildew on my pile of books. A windowless room without a ray of light or a breath of life. I thrashed around like a lifeless corpse, apathetically watching the clock hands inch along heavily, marveling that I was alive and experiencing the lives of me, Ho, and Chai, feeling the pains they had gone through, living like a ghost. He was an ambitious young man full of aspirations. At 5 a.m. this morning, he was already in downtown New York running marketing for his company's project. He took pictures and sent them to me of the locals' early morning activities, silvery fish flickering in nets, the dawn seascape, round buckets bobbing on the waves. Missing him terribly, I was also extremely envious that he had such energy. While around me there was only darkness, once again, he brought me a little bit of life to start the new day. I jumped up, quickly washed and threw on a thin silk shirt. I wanted to struggle with all my might, tearing apart the horrors that had been embracing my body the past few days. My choice was to run to the familiar cafe, find a seat by the window and quietly watch the hustle and bustle of life. I ran away from myself, ran away from my own home in order to look back at myself. I ordered a hot chrysanthemum tea and started drifting into daydreams by the poetic window and soothing cafe music. New York was strange this year with rain and winter. Watching the raindrops pattering heavily on the leaves, I thought summer had arrived. Thousands of memories flooded my mind, writhing and suffocating. Outside the window were the lush, flourishing leaves of the golden trumpet tree, often described as the king of flowers with its royal yellow color. They were arrogant like that, yet as children we mercilessly picked the flowers, smashed them, and made creepy insect food with the ants and bugs. What reminded me most of the golden trumpet tree were the little butterflies. Not until I grew up and Googled them did I learn they were called cabbage white butterflies. They were tiny butterflies covered in soft green-white like newly sprouted leaves, needing no bright colors or patterns stamped on those wings, simple, innocent, and fragile. On sunny days, they would flutter above the golden trumpet trees in great numbers, creating an idyllic poetic scene that still haunted me when I remembered my innocent childhood. The little girl behind me spoke in a very soft voice. "Excuse me, do you have a tissue? May I have one?" I turned to look at her, an 8-year-old girl in a white dress, smiling expectantly, an old Canon camera in her hand. "No, I don't have any," I replied, then turned my face back to continue setting my soul adrift on the raindrops by the window. In a brief moment, I realized the girl had a bright grin with even corn kernels for teeth, her short hair buoyant like the lazy clouds drifting by on a sunny day. She approached the window where I sat, held up her camera to eye level, aimed the lens outside at the scenery through the window frame, then unexpectedly turned and snapped a picture of me. The sudden camera flash blinded me uncomfortably. "What are you doing?" I snapped angrily. "Taking your picture," she giggled as if nothing had happened. She came closer and showed me the photo she just took. "Do I look pretty?" I stared at the camera screen. The lonely, empty chairs in the cafe were dull and bleak. On the table still sat my half-finished tea, but where was I? I looked up at her, still stunned, but she just gave me a pure, innocent smile, her eyes as clear as the puddles outside, the whole sky, the swaying golden trumpet leaves in the cold, dreary winter rain. Where was I? I screamed internally. She ran back to her table, leaving me in shocked bewilderment. Had my eyes been buried in dreams for so long that I could no longer find myself? How strange, did I meet a ghost, or had I ceased to exist in this world? Impossible, I reassured myself. The old shabby Canon camera hung around her neck like a journalist, a professional photographer. But wait, she was only about 8 years old. Who was she? I turned to search for answers, but she was gone. Where she sat, I only saw a cabbage-white butterfly spread its pristine wings and fly out the window as the rain receded. Where was I in that photo? Where was I in this empty cafe, in this life? And who was she? Was she that pure white butterfly now living in the vast skies? The soothing cafe music abruptly switched to the mournful sound of Buddhist chanting, sad beyond limit. The Old Woman on the Green Cypress Tree. This is a legend passed down among the elders where I'm from. Our entire town lies in a basin, surrounded by rolling mountains. When I was little, I often heard people say that at the peak of the tallest mountain here, a coffin belonging to an old ethnic minority woman was buried right at the top, under a green cypress tree that had been struck by lightning. Legend has it that cypress used to be the biggest tree on that mountain, but one day it was suddenly struck by lightning and charred black. At that time, someone admitted to catching a glimpse of a woman's silhouette perched in the tree. When the lightning bolt hit the cypress, the woman just sat there as if nothing had happened. Then in the blink of an eye, she vanished as if she'd never existed at all. If that was all, it would only frighten the faint of heart. But what was more terrifying was the bizarre chain of events that followed. These highlands had a custom of grazing cattle on the hills, and young children in the families often helped their parents herd the cows when they had nothing else to do. In this area, there must have been hundreds of such children, but one day there was news that a child near Mount Puni was abducted by an unidentified old woman. That child went missing. The police quickly investigated and searched for the woman based on witness accounts. They combed through every hill and forest until finally discovering a deep cave on Mount Puni that contained a child's remains. Later forensic tests confirmed the skeleton belonged to the missing child. After that, fewer and fewer children were allowed to herd cattle. Following the first incident, similar cases occurred in succession. Any missing child they searched for in that cave, they inevitably found scattered bones. One day, right next to my house, someone also went missing. The child had left in the morning but didn't return by evening. Usually they would herd the cows back to the stables by noon, but there was no sign of the child doing that. The family became suspicious and gathered a huge group to ascend the mountain where people believed the child may have been taken by the rumored woman. When they arrived, they did discover the real child, but miraculously, the child was still alive this time. According to the child's account, he was herding cows when a hand suddenly clamped over his mouth and he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he found himself in this rocky cave, his limbs unbound but unable to move. Just as he glimpsed a pitch-black shadow at the end of the cave, he heard the search party's shouts. He cried out to alert them, and was found. Everyone quietly heaved a sigh of relief because it seemed they had arrived just in time. If they were a little later, the child likely wouldn't have survived. The bizarre legend of the woman in the cypress tree always haunted me from childhood to adulthood. Legend says her corpse lies in a coffin buried beneath that cypress tree. Only by digging up and burning that coffin could she be prevented from ever returning to harm people again.